Yeah, we are ready to go live. So, hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome back uh, to this campaign, which is happening online through Zoom. The campaign is called Better Bus Bengaluru, and the idea really is to try and focus on the humble bus, which unfortunately does not get the attention it deserves in planning, in finance, and also in our minds. And so the approach in this campaign is really to try and ask why is that so, and should it be so? And this is a campaign we are running with Bengaluru Moving, which is organized as part of a wider effort to try and focus on bringing back the bus to being central to public transport. So this is the second of a 5-part webinar series, and I'm grateful to all my colleagues for having worked to pull this together. And I take this opportunity to welcome the panelists for today. We have Professor Geetam Tiwari, who has done extraordinary work in promoting the bus as part of the core strategy. I wouldn't even say bus as a technology, but as a part of a core strategy to make cities functional. And she has worked for decades, and she's written books on it. She has worked extensively across the world, and especially in Indian cities. And she's in the Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi, where she's a full professor, and she also heads a department on transportation. And she will be sharing with us her work over decades. And the question we're going to ask her is going to be not about what is the bus going to do to save it, but I'll save the question for a little later. But wait, let me introduce the other panelists. Dr. Usha Rao, she is an anthropologist, and she did a work in University of Pennsylvania, and in Bangalore, a remarkable work is about doing a documentary called Our Metropolis, which she and Gautam Santi documented what's happening to the city of Bangalore for almost 5 years. I mean, really running around the city, documenting everything and different strands, and then pulling it together into this amazing, more than an hour long, or maybe 1.5 hour long documentary, which tells you what happened to Bangalore between about a decade ago or 5 years. And I would welcome you to invite Usha wherever you can to show that documentary, because it's worth watching it with her and Gautam Santi. We then have Shaheen Shasha. She is from the Bengaluru Bus Prayanikara Vedike. She's quite well known in Bangalore for promoting a variety of public concerns, but recently she has been working really hard in trying to forestage the inclusivity of the bus. And the idea being, why is it that the bus is not given the kind of importance that it deserves, especially when Bangalore's population is mainly using the bus. About 45 lakh trips are daily made by the bus, a public bus in Bangalore, and yet it doesn't get the priority. So more recently, she has worked on trying to get some bus lanes going. Then we have Ms. Shika. She is the Managing Director of the Bangalore Metropolitan Transport Corporation. She'll be joining us shortly. And you can see online how incredible her effort is in trying to promote the use of buses as not necessarily a public transport method, but also as a means to change the lifestyles of people in Bangalore. And for that, she has started working from the ground up. And she has worked with the workers who keep the bus systems going, especially the bus conductors and drivers who toil day in and day out to, meander the buses through the chaotic traffic in Bangalore today. So on that note, I invite you all. I'm happy all of you made time to join us, and we shall get going with this conversation. And so my question to Professor Geetam Tiwari is really about, we all know that you worked very hard in making the bus rapid transit system central to Delhi's mobility challenges. And Sheila Dikshit was initially supportive of that idea. And then there was this whole car lobby that came in, and I still remember, for instance, the media, the way in which they attacked the fact that a portion of the portion of the road space was being allocated exclusively for bus lanes. Now, of course, they were worried that the cars were not getting enough space, and one can imagine how powerful the car lobby in Delhi is, and who this lobby constitutes in terms of the elitism that they come to. These were not taxi drivers complaining. These were the guys who had like 5-6 cars and not being able to go to work or Connaught Place and so on. But really the question is, why is that we have such a politics in India? Why is that we have not matured as a democracy to understand that the road is really a landscape on which democracy dances? And why is the bus not getting its full josh, if I may say, to dance on the roads?
Okay, thanks, Leo. It's wonderful to be part of this very important campaign, I would say. And to answer your question, I would like to just share a couple of slides, which kind of is a reminder to my experience in Delhi. So let me just share and take you through this very quickly. I mean, this is not going to be a long presentation. Yes. Yeah, when you discussed with me, about the buses, this whole politics or difficulty in accepting bus lanes, I thought, let me just kind of remind ourselves, because my answer really depends on understanding some of these issues. So let's start with this. Why do cities really invest in public transport? I think these are the 4 reasons given all the time. And most of the time I see the first reason, reduce congestion. And I put lots of question marks there because this is where we have to do a lot of introspection in order to answer your question. And if the roads are not congested, are we expecting car users to shift to buses? Or are we expecting two-wheeler riders to shift to buses? So we really have to answer this question. When we talk about congestion reduction, are we worried about car users or are we worried about bus users? Improve air quality and control sprawl. These are also 2 other issues given, but I put it in red because this is also not directly related to bus systems. It's about technology. 4th one is important. Yes, it does provide mobility choices, which is very important. I'm not able to, yeah. I think this picture, everybody in this webinar will recognize that, we are doing bus lanes basically to solve this problem. It's kind of a no-brainer. Of course, we want to take buses out of congestion. But, and this is our motivation. This was the motivation in Delhi. We started with this picture. This is the street picture that we used in Delhi to make a case for bus lanes. And we can see that a 3-lane road is really being used as a 2-lane road. You can see the dust on the leftmost lane because no motorized vehicle is able to go there. So we use this really picture to make a case that why we need to simply do different kind of road designs. And as part of that comes out to be, and we wanted to solve this problem. This is the very common problem we see in all our cities. And when we ended up doing a different road cross section, we actually got this, you know, the first picture is showing that all mixed traffic, people are walking on the road, bicycle, everything like any other street in any Indian city. And finally, when we did the same street, it was redesigned. First thing we did was have a separate pedestrian path, followed by a separate bicycle lane. And only then you can talk about bus lanes. So bus lane alone is not the solution in Indian street. It's this understanding that how you use your roads, design your road space to meet the needs of the road users. And we always have bicycles and pedestrians on our roads. Unless we solve that problem, we are not solving bus problem. Hawkers are extremely important in our roadscape. Without hawker, the roads become more crime prone. These are eyes on the street. Not only that, they're integral part of a public transport system and people walking and bicycling. They're the service sector, so we cannot ignore. So we end up doing a lot of details, and these are pictures of the corridor which was designed. You can just see details where the turnings are happening, details of bicycle lane, details of lighting, details of textures. So it's all about fine details. This is what we ended up with. The kind of media support which you already discussed. And this picture I actually took from Times of India, published in 2008 on one of the Sundays, and had a big feature article on, they called it Big Road Trauma. And you see the caption of this, that actually explains all our answers. The caption of this picture is, buses ply on the road as commuters are stuck in a traffic jam on the BRT corridor. You see, people sitting inside the bus are not considered mainstream commuters. Commuters can only be people sitting in the car. And we are all the time worried about congestion facing car. So we do a bus lane, but we want to solve the problem for car users. This is the dilemma that we face. And as long as we are stuck in this situation, that we are worried about car congestion, we are not moving away from this. So what happens? I'm skipping a lot of other details. In 2012, there was an PIL in Delhi High Court. Delhi High Court gave a very strong decision in favor of BRT. And in fact, they said that soon we will have a situation that all roads in Delhi will have to be designed like this because we don't have any other options. But what happens? In 2014, Aam Aadmi Party comes to power. And it's ironical that the first thing they want to do is do away with BRT corridor. The bicycle lanes are still there, but the bus lanes are gone. Yet, the same government wants to introduce buses, and the same government is happy to observe car-free days. So now this is the complication we have to understand in this whole politics. So basically, I think first thing we have to understand is that, sustainable development principle for roads is really about not equal road to everybody. There is a priority. If we don't accept that priority, we cannot come up with either bus lanes or pedestrian paths or bicycle lanes. And the priority has to be shown in road design and as well as in operations. Operations meaning when we are designing crossing, traffic signal, the priority has to be shown there also. But if we accept this priority, and as sustainable believers in sustainable transport and sustainable development, if we accept that priority, we have to understand that this is giving rise to a number of conflicts. The first conflict is coming from car users facing delays. That is what we see in the picture. This is a powerful, very vocal minority, but it's a powerful minority. It captures the media. We saw how the media campaigns around this. Second, to my understanding, is city, state, and national decision makers are all car users, which is fine. But the unfortunate part is that often the personal experiences are extended for making public policy. Public policies are not understanding the principles which we say in all our policy documents. You look at National Urban Transport Policy, you look at National Mission for Sustainable Habitat, including smart city policy. Everywhere we keep talking about equity, inclusive, sustainability, but that does not get translated to actual implementation strategies, and our personal experiences get translated there. Often there are short-term benefits by expanding road spaces. We know you make a flyover and people are happy that the cars are moving fast, but this is very short-lived. And also this is in conflict with our long-term goals. Because if we keep on solving congestion problem for cars, in fact, we are inviting more car users. We could do the other way. We could make, and we have enough data from the world to support this. If we make good bicycle lanes, if we make good bus lanes, more people start using these systems. But it takes time. It does not happen overnight. And the fourth, also equally important conflict, because vehicle manufacturers are all the time worried about cars and motorcycle sales. How many times have we seen really that our vehicle manufacturers are really worried that no city is buying buses? None, because the bus market is driven by state. It is not individuals who are going to buy buses. So as personal incomes rise, that does not necessarily translate into buses. So there is no demand.
Professor Tiwari, we lost you there. Hello? Can you hear us? I think we have lost Professor Tiwari. I'll just give a few more seconds to her to see if she can rejoin.
Send her a chat message.
Yeah, what did you say?
Maybe send her a chat message. Maybe she doesn't know we can't hear.
Yeah, why don't we allow her to join back and continue later? Because Sana, Bhargavi, could you call her?
Yeah, Leo.
Yeah, okay.
But maybe we could move. Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
meanwhile, she's entered again. Yeah. Sorry, these things happen in the platform. We have to engage. Yeah,
because I just got disconnected.
Oh, sorry. We are back. Yeah, so if you'll have to share your screen again and continue.
Yeah, just one moment. Host disabled participant screen sharing. So you have to first.
I have to make your host
do that.
So just give me a minute. These are the precautions we took because the other day somebody came and spammed and disrupted the meeting. So we didn't know we were that popular.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's good that they find it.
Yeah, now it's coming. Yeah. All right. Just last two slides to conclude this answer to your very short question. Policies like car-free days, odd and even scheme, which only result in symptomatic relief, short-term, are considered successful. And long-term or permanent solutions like bus lanes and bicycle lanes are given a lip service. We've seen that happen everywhere. And I think finally we have to understand that, today we are facing that development and modernity is associated with technology, whether it's fuel technology or automobile technology or metro rail, but buses are considered outdated systems. Also very important, external financing favors large construction projects. So in the name of public transport, you have a lot of external funding available for metros, but not for bus lanes or buses. And zero emission modes, walking and cycling they don't have any market value. And most worrying part is the last one. Successful public transport projects are those which do not affect the cars adversely. And if only they benefit public transport users, that is not considered successful. And that's exactly what happened in Delhi. And the projects, BRT projects and bus lanes which are working in Delhi, in India today, are the ones where in the car lane, the cars are also moving fast and the buses also have an exclusive lane. So it's really not solving the bus congestion problem. It is becoming like yet another construction project. So let me stop here and then maybe follow up with this, with more questions from you.
Thank you very much. So I think you have set the tone for this discussion in bringing to the fore the politics that is involved in making sure the bus, which is so functional to making a city functional, is actually peripheralized. On that note, I actually would like to invite Usha to speak about how arguments for inclusive public transport are systemically peripheralized. And would you do that both from your own research work, Usha, as well as from the film Our Metropolis, the experience of making that film? So and you know, build on this conversation for us.
Yeah. Can I try and pull up those slides?
Yeah, if you want to do it from your laptop, you can. Yes.
Yeah, I'm on the laptop.
Screen.
I'm on the laptop.
Yeah.
I'm just going to try and 1 second, please. Okay. Am I audible?
You're audible, but I made you a co-host so that you can share your screen.
Okay. Right. So first of all, very quickly, thank you, Leo. Thank you, Bhargavi, for inviting me to be on this panel. I'm very honored to be on with Shaheen and Professor Geetam and everyone else. And I'll just quickly say a few, I'll just actually take up from where Professor Geetam left off. The whole notion of the city, when we talk about the city of late, is when I say of late, I mean over the past, say, a decade and a half, we cannot talk about the city without using the magic words of connectivity, mobility, and transport and decongestion. So it's almost as if the whole idea of good governance in a city is to make things flow fast on the roads. So our idea of what is a functional and efficient and productive city is linked very intimately to having control over space and time, which is a very quintessential kind of a modern, that's how we define modernity. So that is the kind of overarching image we have of a city, especially a global city. And as Dr. Geetam very rightly pointed out, so for us to have to establish ourselves as a city that is competitive and can vie with others for global finance and global trade, we need.
Can I just stop you there? Can we just make sure you adjust your mic camera so we can see you properly?
I don't know how to do that.
No, just tilt your camera. We're not able to see you.
Like that?
So that, yeah, okay, that's it. That's perfect. Yeah, thanks. Sorry, carry on. Yeah.
Sorry, I can't see myself.
That's okay. Fine. You are fine now.
Okay. So in order to do that, what was I saying? Yeah. So then mobility gets equated with a certain kind of cutting edge technology, which the metro has come to symbolize. And that for us to be global city, we need to have a certain kind of transport. So I pulled up one slide for you to share with you all. So there is a certain kind of aesthetic that is associated with the metro.
You have to share your screen, Usha. Sorry. You have to share your screen.
Okay, Leo, I'm not very adept at this.
So let's forget the slide. Just speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
So and make sure we see you.
Okay, I'm going to switch it off. Then I'm just going to there.
So,
Okay, all right. So yeah, because I couldn't anyway. Maybe if there's time, I'll share the slides. So yeah, so the whole idea is that the metro is associated with a certain kind of aesthetic. That is, it's quote unquote clean, it's air conditioned, it's fast, it's also predictable in terms of when you can get on the train and when you can get off the train. So the entire entire touch and feel of the metro makes you feel like you're part of this very efficient, extremely world-class city. So that is one thing. Secondly, when planners are thinking about transport, they're also planning for Homo economicus, which is defined in a very narrow way. In Bangalore, through the research, through my doctoral research and through the work that Gautam and I were doing, and it's also very clear to all of you who are on this webinar, that they are thinking of a certain kind of person who's a professional, namely an IT worker, a professional who's associated with IT and software kind of work, or maybe finance and banking. So it's a very kind of middle class, upper middle class commuter they have in mind. It leaves out very, very, very sort of obviously leaves out the majority of our workforce who walk, who cycle, and take buses to work. And Shaheen is here. I don't want to repeat what she might be saying, and she has vast experience, but we all know that the buses carry 10 times more than the metro does. So there is this kind of fascination with the metro, and it is a fascination that comes from, like I said, the aesthetic of it, the way it symbolizes modernity, it symbolizes progress, and it symbolizes a kind of clean and neatness. Never mind the way it's built or it's administers and what it does to neighborhoods when it passes through, but the overall so it's a kind of fetish. It is a fetish that our cities are wedded to now, and more than 50 cities are going to get metros. And I was at a seminar where someone actually said whether they like it or not. So the fact is that we are chasing this kind of image of what constitutes a city and what is the urban. That's so sidelining everything else. Secondly, there is very scant. Leo, am I answering your question?
Yeah, you're doing well. Yes, please. Yeah, it's perfect.
So, secondly, how are these? So there's obsession with movement, obsession with connectivity and mobility, gives us this feeling that, and also there's a third element to it, that everything that's done in the name of infrastructure, be it the steel flyover or those signal-free corridors or the metro, is done for the good of, in inverted commas, the city. So the city is this nameless catch-all thing that exists nowhere, but that's evoked all the time to push through projects. And as Leo raised the issue of democracy, where these large, large projects with so much capital riding on them have no space for public consultation. They have no space for any kind of interrogation or even engagement. And we've seen time and again, and this is something we've watched in Bangalore, where queries are stonewalled, RTIs are unanswered, and of course the public are not even invited in any significant way. For instance, a small example I'll give you from when we started making Metropolis from 2008 onwards. There was a lot of interest. Das, yourself, Leo, and Vijay, and Katyayani, a host of others had very good plans for alternative modes of transport, cycling, walking, etc., which were not even heard. before I forget, so then there is the question of democracy. And thirdly, which is again something that I want to bring to this forum, because we need to think about it very seriously. We never speak of the city in terms of the spaces where it is actually lived. The city is not some nameless thing. It's not a macro entity, proper noun. It is actually lived in neighborhoods. It's lived on the street. It's lived in homes. What happens to, why can't we, why is it that we are kind of planners and people who draw up blueprints don't even look at these things? And this is not even considered. Nor do we actually closely look at what happens to these places of inhabitation when a metro or a large flyover comes across. Then, and if there is time, I'd like to quickly just talk about, I wish I could show you those slides. Maybe I can come back to it because it's very relevant, I think. Let's take the recent case of, so I worked on two areas, one in my field work, one is Alsu. And through Metropolis, we've looked at what happened to Nanda Road and what happened to Malini's house and Girija's house. We've looked at many instances where, a road widening or a metro project actually literally bulldozed over other people's lives. But just in a more recent way, I'll quickly say why we need to think about this and why this has a bearing on even something like mobility. Let's take the instance of, say, an Alsur, which is an old neighborhood, which is, very rich, vibrant street life, very dense habitation. There is a metro that has come across the neighborhood, actually dividing the neighborhood into two halves. So what happens when a metro comes into a neighborhood? Real estate prices skyrocket. Many tenants are evicted because they can no longer afford to pay the rent. There is a transformation of homes and spaces into real estate. And when that happens, people who are actually inhabiting those spaces, who are walking to work or cycling to work or taking the bus to work, are forced to move further away. So it actually leads to sprawl. So you're pushing people off into further away, who again need to be connected, because how do they reach their points of work? How do kids go to school? So so then it actually compounds the problem when you're not looking at, looking at what happens to neighborhoods. Let me give you another instance of the Bamboo Bazaar playground, which has been taken over recently by the metro to build the station, although they were offered space outside the cantonment metro station. So what happens when the metro station is built in a playground? It serves not only as a playground for schools in the area. This is a poorer neighborhood. It's a vastly working class neighborhood, very dense again. And people either are small traders in the area, or they do work like electricians, plumbers, etc. So they are contained within a space that includes their work and their home living space. Kids go to local schools, which are good missionary schools, which are otherwise unaffordable for people of that income level. So when you put, and the playground, which is the eye of the neighborhood, is where community events happen. That's where children gather to play, and which is the only lung space they have. So what happens? Again, people are moved out. It transforms itself into a high estate island, and people are pushed to the periphery, and some of them who are going to be losing their homes don't even know where they're going. So then you have so then again you have the situation where, it's being done for the city, but then what about the neighborhood? What about the local? Isn't the city a collection of these spaces? The last thing I wanted to say is that like all of you, and I'm sure Shaheen and others presentation, and like Professor Geetam also said, that the fact is that exclusivity of the metro is its selling point. That somehow that it has an exclusive corridor. You can count the minutes when you can get off. So I was actually told by a very high level person in BMRCL in the course of my work, who said that our commuter, he, by the way, will be more productive, and therefore, because he will know when he will reach the office, and therefore the city itself will become more productive. So exclusivity is the selling point, where it goes on its own. So why not have an exclusive corridor for the bus? And those people who are riding the bus, they too can be more productive, to reduce it again to an economic argument. Thirdly, there is a whole network of suburban rail, and which people have been trying to really lobby for and to bring into a kind of united umbrella. The UMTA in Bangalore has been suggested multiple times, but it has always been shelved because it doesn't get attention. So we need to look at it in a more integrated way. We cannot look at it piecemeal. We need to look at it in an integrated way, and we need to look at the majority, like Professor Geetam already pointed out, the majority of people who are moving through the city. And it is time we also started looking at how we inhabit the city, because then maybe it will open up a whole lot of other things that we have not even imagined. So we need to reimagine what we think of as the city. And just a last word of complete dread: with COVID, we're going to have more private vehicles on the road. So that is something to actually think very seriously about.
Thank you, Usha. I think, you kind of brought in a lot of dimensions that are very central to this conversation that we are having. And in fact, when we wrote this thing, the theme for today as one should be able to bus from anywhere to anywhere else. I would even argue that one should be able to cycle from anywhere to anywhere else as much as walk as well. The idea is actually about making sure the city is not a stratified landscape where certain modes of travel become more privileged and the others are not. But the sense of equality and equity is so balanced that the one which actually extends the most inclusivity to the resident of a city should be the one which is most prioritized. But here comes the unfortunate conflict between, or perhaps the deliberate conflict, which was seeded on many of our urban landscapes between the metro and the bus system. And I can go back to the 1990s, mid-90s, when Mr. Vijay Mallya came with a plan for an elevated light rail transit system for Bangalore. We had experts from Singapore who came and promised that they will turn Bangalore into a world-class city. But when we asked them to explain what part of Bangalore is world-class to them, they were quite concerned only about what most people are when they want to do something for Bangalore, the MG Road Boulevard. So we remember. I remember having public hearings at that time. Even before public hearings were instituted as part of decision making, we created our own public hearings, and the amount of interest there was to ensure the buses which had kind of carried Bangalore for so many decades. Why are we not having investors to come and support that system? I'm not making a case for privatization here, please don't get me wrong, but the idea being that why is there no money flowing into the bus system? So this has been a very structural injustice that has been done to the BMTC now. We have Ms. Tika to speak soon after Shaheen speaks, but I want to ask Shaheen to come in now, and I have a very peculiar question for you, Shaheen. I recall having a conversation when this whole Marthali bus lane experiment started some months ago. And I asked the city commissioner, the police commissioner, we're all going there and creating a huge effort to make that bus lane work. And I asked you, Shaheen, are we not falling into the same trap that we used to fall in, of making MG Road the visible object of a functional city? It was always MG Road. It's as if none of the other neighborhoods ever mattered. So why was it that the bus lane was only focused on what we call the so-called IT corridor of Bangalore. And I argued on the western side of Bangalore, people take buses. In fact, more people take buses there. And they're all industrial workers. They're working classes. They're poor people. And the same is the case in the south, where absolutely the density of bus systems is very sparse, especially as you move towards peri-urban. So my argument then was, by prioritizing a bus lane, again, for what I would say the privileged section of Bangalore, the IT workers, did we go wrong?
So yeah, I mean, I don't know, how much is it something that, we had a say in. I mean, it was from Bus Pranikara Vedike, we were looking at it more as, okay, this has been announced, and, now it is an opportunity for us to see that at least we have a demonstrable solution. So, I mean, I would probably, whenever Shikha speaks, I think that she might be in a better tell us why this kind of a choice was made, and why was placed to do this. I mean, some of the answers that we have heard during that time is it's one place where already so many lanes are there, so it is a good opportunity to demonstrate the idea, etc. These are the arguments that we have heard. Another argument that we've heard is also, it is roads where, and if we can prove it there, if we can show it working there, then it becomes a success story, which then can spread across the rest of the city. So these are some of the arguments that we have heard. I mean, personally, and even from Bus Pranikara Vedike, we feel that it has to be looked at as a network, a route network of buses, rather than as, single corridors. So that just looking at a corridor alone will not solve the problem for the city, and that it is unless we see it as a part of a larger network, even as a demonstration. I mean, can having a bus lane running in just a 22-kilometer corridor, and even if it is considered successful, that would not be sufficient. So definitely, we also feel that this is something that needs to be looked at as a citywide solution, and not a solution only in those parts of the city which get this kind of attention. My only sort of the only happy thing about it is that, okay, in that most congested or one of those roads where is so much of space that has been grabbed by other vehicles, we were able to get some space earmarked for bus, and that to that extent it feels like a victory, a small victory for bus. I mean, so that's kind of the positive that I would see. But definitely, it should be seen as a solution for all, and not a solution for only an IT corridor or only a selective class of users. But at the same time, I would also like to say that IT employees are not the only people who are using bus even on those lanes. So I mean, a large number of whether it is a security guards or housekeeping staff, or domestic workers, or various other construction workers, all the so when you travel the bus on that road, you do see that it's not only the IT crowd that is using. But yeah, I mean, that definitely did get a lot of attention, that it is the IT corridor, and we were putting a solution there. So I mean, yeah, I mean, that's my position to justify that choice more than us. I mean, we were not
Sorry, may I just add a question there? From the Bus Pranikara Vedike platform, if you were to speak for all the commuters, what are the issues they bring when they meet?
So, see, there are multiple issues that the commuters are facing. I mean, fare being one of the big issues that we have highlighted for a long time. For a large section of commuters, the fares continue to be unaffordable. But when we interact with commuters, what we also, and often, it used to be presented as, the fare is affordability is an issue for, the economically weaker sections of society, and connectivity and other things are issues for the more sort of, the what they call the choice commuters, or the middle class, or above, who we have to draw into the bus. But when we actually interact with commuters, what we see is, it is equally a problem for the, people living in poorer neighborhoods, or, people coming from people who are considered the captive, riders. I mean, it's not a term I agree with, but I mean, that's a typical term that is used. Connectivity, predictability, reliability, all these are concerns as much for this group of commuters. So whether it is the frequency of services, the long wait time, um, the connectivity from one area to the other, last mile access in terms of how close your neighborhood is to the nearest bus stop. So all of this also add to the cost for people. So sometimes they are having to take a shared auto to the nearest bus stop, which is 2-3 kilometers away, and then take a bus. And each of this, and when you change buses again, you're buying 2 tickets, and that is also costing more. So the range of issues are multiple, and it is not only that the middle class commuters who are concerned about connectivity and access. It is as much a problem even for the working class who is using the bus. So I mean, reliable, predictable rides, comfortable rides, frequency, travel time. Spending 2 hours traveling from one place to the other is a serious concern for a bus user. I mean, if the car user is spending that kind of time on the road, the bus user is also equally spending the same amount of time on the road for no fault of theirs. I mean, because like we all can see, bus is the most efficient vehicle on the road today. I mean, 6,500 buses and 37-40% of the traffic, and the rest of the 60% traffic, or maybe even slightly lesser, much lesser traffic is being carried by lakhs of vehicles. So despite being the most efficient and equitable mode, the bus users are suffering the most in terms of time taken to commute for no fault of theirs. So these are the range of issues that commuters who are currently bus users are already facing. It's not just to attract more users to bus, but even to solve the problem of the existing commuter base. These are issues that need to be addressed.
You have actually helped in bringing to the table the type of the diversity of issues that there are when you actually create this forum, the Bus Prayanikara Vedike. Now, this is the kind of diversity which has to be dealt with every day, and this diverse demands, this very complex demands, coming from a city with about 1.3 crore people. No joke. I recall when I was a student and I used the bus quite extensively those days. We had to actually jostle, fight with the vendors who would bring vegetables from the fields, from the edge of the city into the city market. And if you took the early morning buses, the carriage above the bus would be packed with vegetables. And now we don't see that, of course, right? You can't even imagine the possibility of anyone who is a vendor walking into a metro with bags of goods, especially now with all of this, right? But that's the kind of multifunctionality our bus was. I recall my parents would just place us into the KSRTC bus driver's custody in Bangalore bus station, and we would travel 6-7 hours all the way to my native Coorg when we were kids, and somebody would come and pick us up there. So bus system was also one of trust. We innately trusted the bus drivers. We knew them. They were part of the personal fabric of society. There's so much of a camaraderie with the bus when I grew up. And today it has become, like Usha says, this very slick and impersonal. You can't even see the driver in the metro system. And everyone is a machine who is fitting into this clock, which is ticking. And so one understands the importance of functionality in terms of time. One also understands how space has to be made functional so that everyone feels included. But our cities are highly divided today. The road is divided. The road is monopolized by the private vehicle, especially the car. The metro has monopolized space. And it is extremely difficult to even have conversations with people who promote the metro, because it's almost like it's a given, even though they only carry 10% of the commuting population. Or if you take the entire traveling population, it is even less. I'm just talking about 10% of the public commuting population. The metro gets so much political importance, whereas the bus does not. And so this is a question that I have for Ms. Shika, she's joined us. Thank you for joining us. Can you please, I'm trying to ask you to start your video as well so that we can, have you come in. So you obviously are in a very difficult position, dealing with a huge commuting population. And at the same time, you have a huge popular support. And you're also very popular. I mean, after you drove the bus yourself, you've been more popular than you were before. So tell us, how do you make the bus popular now? And how do you make bus lanes popular? We are behind you on that.
So thank you for inviting me.
See you. I don't know
Can
why.
you see me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me try to make your. Yeah. Okay. That's okay. Thank you.
So
Yeah.
thank you for inviting me over to attend this video conference. It has been a very enlightening seminar so far, and I agree with you completely. Bangaloreans love BMTC. At one point of time, we were carrying around 50 lakh passengers. And over the years, it has come down to 35 lakhs. So pre-COVID days, we were carrying around 35 lakh passengers. So what is the reason of this decrease? One of the most important reason is the snarling traffic on the road, on Bangalore roads. What happens once there are huge number of private vehicles? Obviously, bus start moving slowly. And once bus start moving slowly, already the people who are on the bus would want to go faster. So they will also come down to private vehicle. They may take a two-wheeler or hire a four-wheeler to move faster. And that means that many more private vehicles added to the already huge traffic on the road. So it's a vicious circle. So the only way to break this vicious circle is to make buses go fast. And for that, we realized that bus lane was a very good idea. And as a pilot, we started in ORR. Why ORR? Also not because it was an IT corridor or anything. There were 2-3 important reasons. First most important reason is a pilot has to start somewhere. So, and second thing, more importantly was that the design of ORR is very well suited for BRTS or bus priority lane. When it was conceptualized and implemented itself, it was they were having the BRTS concept in mind. And so as you see here, we are having 6 lanes and then one service lane. So it was very well suited for our need, because for bus priority lane, when we want to give an exclusive lane for buses, it is very important that 2 extra lanes remain for the remaining traffic. It was also a most least resistance route for us, because already 6 lanes were there. And whenever there is a new initiative, especially for public transport, there is not much support there that can be garnered. But if you already have a 6 lane, then obviously there will be minimal resistance from people. That was the third reason. And fourth reason, it is just a pilot. There are another 12 high density corridors which are planned for this year. And if not for COVID, we would have started implementation in those also. So this is the reason why we started the plan for bus priority lane. Then another question was, why bus priority lane and why not BRTS? I feel that any day bus priority lanes are better than BRTS, because again, the infrastructure investment is very less in BPL compared to BRTS. Here, and then you can also have pop-up bus lanes. If you don't fix bollard, like we have fixed bollards in our priority lane, but if you want something like pop-up bus lane, priority lane to come up, even that is feasible. Our plan is that wherever 6 lanes are there, we want to go ahead and have a permanent bus priority lane, and wherever 4 lanes are there, we can think of a pop-up bus lane only during peak hours. Because peak hours is the time when we see the major delay in traffic, major obstruction to traffic, and people have to take much more, and that is a crucial time when people want to move faster. So these are some of the points which BMTC had in mind. And again, this project, it will be very unfair of me if we take the same. It was a multi-departmental project and one of a very successful integration project, because BBMP took the lead, Bangalore Traffic Police helped us in that, and then the infrastructure work, all implementation work is being done by BBMP. DULT has made the designs for us, and they are also in the process of making designs for other high density corridors where bus priority lane is conceptualized. So it was a multi-departmental approach, which thankfully has been very successful. when bus priority lane was implemented, we could show a drastic reduction in time taken to travel, and the speed of buses had also improved. But unfortunately, it had to wait for some more time for completion. Now the bus priority lane is almost complete. The physical aspect is complete, and only the signages part is remaining, which is being done by BBMP.
Thank you for explaining the politics behind, or the politics of decision making behind making bus priority lanes priority. But I have a follow up to that. Bangalore's BMTC has 6,500 buses, and you're actually, I hear you complaining that when we can actually carry more people, less people are traveling. But I can also say that I live in the southern edge of Bangalore, and my work is in the southwestern edge of Bangalore. And this whole hub and spoke model, with which the BTS, as we used to call it back then, when it was a service, now it's become a corporation. So is the shift from service to corporation anything to do with the fact that the areas which do not seem profitable are not necessarily attended to by BMTC now? And therefore, perhaps a lot of people who would otherwise take the bus are forced to take private vehicles. Now, I would have preferred to cycle, but to me, cycling is a death wish, and I don't want to be dead. So, what does one do? I mean, how does one move in a city where moving itself has become such an expensive, non-inclusive, impossible task? And driving is perhaps one of the most boring things to do when you're stuck in congestion. I would rather sit in a bus and chat with somebody and make new friends. I mean, despite COVID and all that. So why is that we are not evolving the bus into a lively, mainstream mobility support system? So again, bringing back, why can't we bus from anywhere to anywhere else? Why only where you want us to bus?
As you correctly pointed out, we are having 6,500, a fleet of 6,500 buses, out of which 800 odd buses are AC Volvo buses. And we cover Bangalore city, BBMP, and most of the suburban areas and the outskirts of Bangalore, and including districts, some of the districts like Kolar, Ramnagar, Chikbalapur, Dodbellapur. So these are some of the suburban portions also which we cover. Now coming back to the main question, whether there are certain gaps. Yes, there are certain gaps. We realize that there are certain uncovered areas, but that is purely because the requirement of the city is not 6,500. It should ideally be 10,000 buses. So BMTC as of today should ideally be having 10,000 buses to cater to all areas and to cater to all kinds of demands. Then ideally we would have been giving the kind of coverage which was required. As you see in Mumbai, the fleet size is not so much, and they carry only around 30 lakh passengers, but then they have a very strong suburban railway connectivity, which we don't have. As of today, metro carries 5 lakh passengers, so 35 lakh plus 5 lakh adds only to 40 lakh. So still the share of public transport is very less. But I am very sure if ideally if number of buses are increased, and in fact in this budget, due to intervention of many organizations, support of many organizations, BMTC was successful in getting we had a budget to acquire around another 3,000 buses. So that and then if you take out the number of buses we would have scrapped, ideally we would have increased our fleet strength to 8,000 by the end of this financial year. But again, we will have to wait again for that. So we have made very aggressive plans for expansion so that all the areas can be covered. And more importantly, right now, how we design a route, how we design a schedule is based on the footfalls, the number of people traveling from point A to point B, and the coverage which we see. But shortly, we are also going to come up with a app where even public can log on their requirements, what is their requirement, from which point to which point they'll be requiring, and even this app which was already there, which is already there, the BMTC My BMTC mobile app, where one can see real-time movement of all the buses, that when is the arrival time and how long one person has to wait at a bus stop for his bus to arrive, his route number bus to arrive. We are upgrading the same app for making it more interactive.
there's a pointed question to you from Shaheen in terms of the financial allocation for the buses. Shaheen, go ahead. Yeah. Anyway, I don't think Shaheen is able to ask the question. So she's saying it's concerning that BMTC is now being forced to use the money allocated for new buses to pay salaries. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. So now that's a big worry, because if your, revenue stream is not being subsidized, or the lack of income is not being subsidized because you are investing in a public good. So this brings back the question to, how come a service has become a profit-making venture with the state? So should we not return BMTC? I mean, I wouldn't mind a loss-making, financial loss-making, but overall public health, overall public stress-free living, overall functionality of the city are gains which you can't enumerate in terms of money. So why is it that the discussion not mainstreamed in the system of governance?
So just one thing I would like to clarify, because I am sure Shaheen would be very worried that all the capital expenditure which was sanctioned to us has been diverted towards salary, but it has just been delayed, not been denied, because we spoke again to and requested the government, and we have been allowed to go ahead with our procurement process, provided the financial incurring of financial cost will be in next financial year. So we can go ahead with making preparations for that tendering and then finalizing the tender, which is again a time consuming process. Only thing, the incurring of expenditure will be next financial year. So that should be taken care of. Now, coming back to your question, you are very right. I think in most of the Western cities, buses are not treated as a profit-making venture. We should not be treated as a corporation. In fact, we should be treated as BBMP. We should be treated as a service provider. And a service should be, obviously, to provide that kind of service. We can't, but I think around 6 to 7 years back, BMTC was a profit-making venture. But after that, as the number of private vehicles on the road increased, as the various other conditions got deteriorated, we have now become a loss-making venture. And not only us, all the city services across India or even across world, city service can never be a profit-making venture. It will make losses. So it should not be treated of how much money a corporation makes per kilometer. It can't be treated like that. Because we have so many competition from private kind of bike services, or shared bikes has also been allowed now. The taxi services are blooming. And at that time, if one is expected to make money to pay their salary, as well as to procure buses, as well as to run corporation, it becomes very difficult for the corporation. So as a policy matter, I agree with you. We should be treated as a service which is financed by the government, like the roads, making of roads. It is financed by the government. Government gives the grants to BBMP or to PWD to make a road. Similarly, buses, we are also providing a service to people, giving transportation, as others have pointed out, is the right of each and every public who resides, and that obviously should be affordable, and that can only happen if we go forward. We have made many proposals to that effect to both central as well as state government, and we are getting some positive signals in that regard. And we should not look at just these revenue by way of fare collection. If it has to be made much more affordable, then we will also have to think of various means like BMLTA, which was there, that is Bangalore Urban Transport Fund, which we have conceptualizing and working towards, and some disincentive for private vehicle. So people think twice before taking out their private car. It could be a diesel cess, it could be a petrol cess, it could be some kind of toll collection, or some kind of parking fees on. Right now, people are taking it as their right to park their cars on the roads, and they take away BMTC's space. We could have driven our buses in those areas, but now that the entire lane is converted into parking place, and it obviously takes away our time also. There has to be a lot of disincentives mechanisms so that BMTC can become a viable venture.
Thank you. And it's a point where you brought in the difficulty of getting buses on the road and making them move, and you have explained to us the multidimensional problems that you have to deal with, and yet provide that service without really having the backing of the state for providing that service. Now, this is the kind of conundrum that India should have faced a long time ago, because the lack of attention to this is perhaps the reason why our cities are collapsing under the weight of private, choice, people choosing private modes of travel, air pollution disasters. And when you have situations such as the pandemic, where public transport systems become almost impossible to use, how does one move forward? That's the kind of question that I would like to raise, Professor Geetam Tiwari, if you could come in and explain to us, how do you get out of the conundrum that we have now got ourselves into, with public transport being shortchanged by the pandemic itself? Can you hear me? Professor Tiwari, are you there?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. What was the question again? I just missed
I was
it.
just saying, Ms. Shika explained about the complexity of running a bus system in Bangalore. So the real problem now we have is the public transport systems, when they should be the ones who get priority. And of course, the bus should get so much more priority, and it doesn't. And our cities are collapsing under the weight of private modes of travel being preferred one way or the other. Now, the pandemic actually has shortchanged the possibility of public transport being a main mode of travel. So how do we get out of this conundrum going forward? Because the world has changed around this. How do you make...
I think this COVID pandemic, in fact, has given us an opportunity to really reserve spaces for bus lanes and for bicycle lanes, because overall traffic is reduced right now, as many people working in the formal sector have been asked to work from home. So the car load on the roads is much less. And this is, to me, this is an ideal time to actually reserve spaces. The pop-up lanes that Shika was talking about, this is, I think, the right time to experiment with that. Of course, in my mind, lane is only the start. Eventually, we have to do many more things if you want to make strong bus systems in the city. So because of pandemic, two things have happened. Number one, we do have more space for at least for some time, till the normal traffic returns on the road. And second, the requirement is that buses cannot be crowded, because you are avoiding crowd. And in all our Indian cities, we have a large population who has to go to work, and they do not have access to private vehicles. That is what is happening in Delhi also. So in fact, metro has been stopped in Delhi, but bus services in a way never stopped here. 25% services were always working. And now, since we are in Unlock 3, almost 70% of the bus services have been restored. And the buses are packed. They have to run more buses. So I see this, number one, opportunity to actually reserve spaces for bus lanes and for bicycles. And number two, this is the time to really increase number of buses, not decrease.
Thank you. I think, there's also another way to see it in Delhi. Chandni Chowk, which used to be so crowded, was using the lockdown turned into a pedestrian-only zone. And people are sharing photos and videos of how much more functional and joyful it is to be in Chandni Chowk, rather than all the time looking over your shoulder about whether somebody is going to run over your feet. So that kind of transformation is possible everywhere. And there is a strong movement to make that. So it's really about making public transport safe and secure. And I see that there's a question on that from Bhargavi. Bhargavi, why don't you go ahead and ask that question?
Yeah, thank you, Leo. Thank you, Shika ma'am, for your presentation. So, Bangalore has been a city where we've heard so many horrible accidents where people have been run over the bus when they were trying to board the bus and alighting the bus. And it's been crazy since I was in school. Leo did mention about, going to school and college in bus. We all did. And yes, it was a nightmare then, but now it's only the Volvo buses which have that low floor where people can get in, even wheelchairs can be moved inside and things like that. So has there been any steps taken by BMTC to ensure safety in boarding and alighting? And I also realize some of the buses are so old. I can even give you the numbers of these buses, the route numbers of these buses, especially those buses going to the city market are very old buses. I don't know what the reason is that we still hold on to them. And these are buses in which senior women who are flower sellers, fruit sellers are bringing in lots of stuff from the market. And if they have to board these buses, which are so tall, the first step is like 3 feet above the ground. Then the second part to that is in terms of safety for women and children. So unless there is safety, I think women will shy away from boarding a bus, especially young college women or anybody else for that matter, and for children as well. So with all the scary stories that parents hear these days, they may not want to send their children by bus. So what kind of steps have been taken by BMTC with respect to that? And the third point to my thing is, I've realized that as it has been a profit-making body, I've seen conductors and drivers shout out through the window and door saying, this is a bus going to the market, please board, just to increase the ridership and increase the business and so on. I think that's a crazy way to, I don't know if it is, their pay is related to the number of ridership, if it's a commission-based thing. I think that's not the right way to go about it. If you have to make it people-friendly and it should not be run on profit, then the city's mobility will be a pleasure. And, I think many speakers have already addressed it. So I'm just highlighting that. Yeah, thank you.
I would like to add that our friend from Mysore Mutt, Vasant Mysore Mutt, who lived in Bangalore for a long time, also says that the bus itself is way behind 1,750 cars that are added to Bangalore's roads every day. So it is really about how we are edging the bus out and making it even more insecure. So Ms. Shikha, would you like to respond to that? I mean, are there any conversations about how to centralize, not centralize in terms of administration, but make the bus central to mobility so that our streets reflect a sense of streets become more welcome, safe, and secure, especially for women, children, and elders, but just about anybody actually.
Okay, so there are multiple questions here. I'll start with safety for women and children. That's my favorite topic also. So right now we have a kind of division where women mostly have to travel on the front of the road, so it is secure. We also, under Nirbhaya scheme, we are also installing cameras in all our 6,000 buses, and along with the panic buttons. So at least some kind of deterrence is also there for safety of women. We have had a kind of training session with all our crew getting trained by by an organization called BPAC about sensitivity to women travelers, where they were told about how to interact with women travelers, how to be more attentive to their requirements. So this kind of soft skills were also imparted to them to ensure that women feel comfortable while traveling in our buses. So these are some of the measures which are being taken. This cameras should be, another 3 or 4 months, all buses would be installed with cameras and panic buttons also. And then coming to next question about the height of the buses. So all our AC buses are low floor, and all our non-AC buses are still with the normal height. This is because obviously the low floor buses are come at a higher cost. But then whatever new tenders we have called, they are with the low floor buses, like the one which we called for integration with metro feeder services. They are also, all those 90 buses we have called for low floor. Another 300 electric buses also we have called tender, which is also for low floor. So whatever new fleet addition we want to do, we want it to be low floor, which is convenient. But obviously it comes with a cost. So we may not be able to go for it 100% in first go itself. And the third point was uh, regarding number of addition of buses. Number of private vehicle added is much higher than the, yes, that's true. We realize that we have a lot of tough competition out there, and to gain back our glory, we will have to aggressively push for better service and better coverage. If we want people to come back, we have made various plans like introducing various different kind of buses, smaller buses for last mile connectivity, feeder services to meet metro. These are some of the new initiatives which we have thought of, and in coming days we'll try to implement. Most important would be our interactive app, by which people will be able to know their plan better. They can plan their routes and trips better.
May I just ask you, to make the bus lane central to changing the way mobility works, is there resistance in the senior administration to making bus lanes possible everywhere?
Because no, not at all. In fact,
problematic is when we talk about metro, I mean, the metro doesn't go everywhere. It is in Bangalore, it's more like a swastika, which means in a radial city, the metro hardly supports mobility. Yet it gets all the attention. When somebody speaks about metro, I mean, and it's one of the oldest technology, railroad technology is not new. Buses can be flexible, they're malleable to the city, they can be adapted to a evolving demand of the city. A metro just is hardwired into the city. It cannot be changed for another 100 years, what we have done to the city now. So why is there no sort of enthusiasm for the bus in the senior administration? I mean, I'm not just saying it from now, but saying it back from the 1980s.
Yes, somehow I don't know why all the capital intensive projects get more limelight and highlight and get highlighted more. But in this year's budget, if you go through, we have been able to garner a lot of space, because first of all, we got 12 high density corridors to be converted into bus priority lane. And obviously, we also got another 3,390 fresh buses to be, which we could have acquired in this single year. So yes, and this epidemic itself has shown that while metro had to be shut down for entire 4 months, BMTC never stopped. We kept our services on. In first lockdown, we were running our health services. Then we started our emergency services, and even during post-COVID, we are carrying 10 lakh passengers every day. And we have put most of our buses into service to ensure social distancing during peak time. So yes, this epidemic also has shown that BMTC is indispensable for the city.
Thank you. There's a question that has come in, and I think, Usha, if you are there, if you can take this. See, there is a privileging of the IT sector over all other sectors. And you've spoke to this in your film, and you have done research on that and continue to do work on that. Now, how do you see and this privileging is not very recent, and this has been systemic to the way Bangalore has evolved over the last 2-3 decades. How do you see a movement to ensure that all parts and all types of people in the city actually can make their demands, and we have a governance system which can respond to those demands? In that sense, make the entire city functional and everyone's life matter.
Okay. So I think, Leo, I may sound very cynical when I say this. I think everyone knows that there are people other than IT workers in this city. I mean, it's not something that people are blind to, but it is a selective kind of a choice that people are in the administration, people who are policymakers who are making because of the stakes involved. Because a metro, as you very well know, is not just only about mobility, it's about real estate, it's about changing the nature of the city itself in terms of the kind of development that comes along as you know very well, it was called the mutation corridor, to actually change what happens on either side of the alignment. So so first of all, I just want to say that this is of course people know there are other kinds of people and that they need to be included, but it is a choice. It's a choice based on finance. It's a choice based on the kinds of loans that are offered. It's a choice made at a different level, because there's also technology that's imported. There's now even the body itself is being imported, although BML was making them earlier. So, so there are all kinds of complex reasons why it is pushed as a choice, as a form of transport that is preferred, and so that is one. The second thing is that the only way that others become visible in the city, I think, is to have something like like an umbrella under which everyone stakes their claim for being able to live and work and play safely in the city. And so that can happen only through mobilization, I feel. That's one thing. Secondly, I think there's a lot of lack of data. For instance, I just want to add that there is, I think someone said that there is suburban rail is very negligible. More than 1.5 lakh people use it every day. There are people who are riding those trains, going to work, as going to Rajajinagar, Yelhanka, all the industrial belts and Whitefield. So we need to make ourselves visible by saying, listen, these are the numbers. These are the people who are out there, and these are the forms of transport, and these are the needs. So it needs to be liaison, mobilizing, and also maybe engaging more with the administration on a common platform, where so you take away the focus only from one kind of kind of a fixed vision about whether it's just the metro or even the BMTC is sending feeder buses. Why focus only on feeder buses? I mean, there's so much of need elsewhere. Thirdly, what was that? Sorry, was that?
Yeah, I think you got the
question.
No, I think you spoke to the basic issue, which is about how privileging.
Yeah.
Sorry, lost that.
One last point I wanted to make was that the metro is not a profit-making entity on ticket sales. So it makes its money through also things like real estate and things like that. So that's very much built into the model of the metro. Just to add that it is also not, making huge profits on ridership. So the BMTC, there's a case for making it a service. Yeah.
Sure. Shine, you want to come in here and explain how commuters are working to make the bus more popular and demand more buses on the road and more bus lanes? I think we lost Shine there. Shine, are you there? You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. As to how commuters are working, actually, one of the struggles that we have faced is in organizing commuters. I mean, commuters, what we have found is as an entity, because particularly we are in transit most of the time, how do we organize commuters has been a challenge for us. So there is no organized commuter movement or group as such. I mean, we're still open to, ideas and, innovative ways in which we can actually organize the commuters. We have not been very successful in that so far. But from Bus Prayanikara Vedike, again, being a small group of voluntary, voluntary group doing, not working full time. I mean, our efforts have been limited in what we could do. So what I want to sort of comment on is, like, in many ways, sort of re-emphasizing or, slightly adding on to the points that have been in discussion here, that, what buses like, so important and central to everything. And, more and more we are seeing that, I mean, there's every reason and logic and rationale, everything is on our side. Still, we are not able to, get the attention of the decision makers, or whether it is the politicians or the bureaucrats. So the biggest challenge that we have is really in shifting the mindset of the people who are making the decisions. I mean, if we see over the last 4-5 years that BBPV has been working, we've even got the media's support reasonably. I mean, we see some of the reporters so actively bat for BMTC all the time. So, that kind of support from media is also existing. So the difficulty that we face is in how do we shift the thinking in the decision making circles. Like everyone rightly pointed out, it's not because solutions are not available. It's not because solutions are not known. It is merely this question of, what is considered important and what is considered worth investing in. There's so much money to put in metro, which is, like Leo said, very inflexible solution, which is not even meeting, significant need. Bus has so much versatility, can actually be designed to serve various kinds of diverse needs in various ways. Despite that, it doesn't get any attention. It can actually it is actually meeting the needs of majority of the city. Still, it doesn't get attention. Whether it is the voting population, it is the it's a bigger voter base. Still, it doesn't get the attention. So it defies logic at all levels. Why buses not getting the attention it requires. I feel this we have an opportunity. I mean, like Geetam also said that there is a space now for us to reimagine how to place the bus in the city also. And I hope that all of us, and with Shikha being in the leadership in BMTC also, we can, it's really a good opportunity for us to work together. A couple of ways in which I feel this can be done is also to look at the bus as a network and reimagine the demand and the route network, etc., bringing in more buses to cater to like Leo said, the many parts which are ignored right now in terms of connectivity and service. This is an opportunity for us to rediscover those pockets which are underserved or unserved, and use the reach out to commuters, reach out to employers, reach out to workers union, etc. And in very innovative ways we can try to map the demand and try to design a network which actually caters to all those latent demands which are not known right now. And it's also an opportunity to look at the network in a different way, integrate those high density corridors and have bus lanes there, and also at the same time look at the connectivity to smaller areas, last mile connectivity. So it's really and there is sanction for more buses. So it's really an opportunity to reimagine how we can position the bus, and also shift from the profit calculation or the earnings per kilometer kind of targets which BMTC is forced to look at currently at an operational level, move to the ridership targets. I mean, what is the ridership currently and what is the ridership we want to aim to? I think these kind of repositioning will really energize the entire system. I mean, see, people are, it's also amazing the kind of support that we received. I mean, as in, BMTC received or bus lanes received when that initiative happened, so there is a sort of a public support and a love for BMTC that exists. Maybe it is not expressed well enough, but it is there, and I think we have to discover that passion and love for the bus. Again, just to respond a little bit to what Usha said earlier about the social, and I think Leo also mentioned there's a social fabric. I mean, when I travel in the bus, I feel connected to the city, but when I travel in the metro, you're so disconnected. It's such a it's something else altogether. But the bus actually brings in more social cohesion. So if you can actually make the bus central to how the city moves, I feel like I'm in a city. When in metro, I can't even see what is outside. I can't connect to what is outside. But when I'm moving in the bus, I feel like I'm traveling in the city. So there's so much going for the bus, whether it is culturally, politically, socially, economically. There is so much going for the bus. Despite that, we are not able to capitalize on that potential and opportunity, and really reimagine and sort of replan the city to make this work. So really it is like and also it then meets the right to access the city. I mean, when we can make this kind of a bus service affordable, also it actually fulfills a fundamental right that people have of accessing the city, and without that access, their right to livelihood or education or lives, all of these don't materialize. So it's that central to living in a city, and really feel like it's an opportunity we should collectively work together to realize.
I wouldn't take too much more time of all our speakers and all of you, but there's a couple of interesting points that have come up. One is from Rahul Datar, and I would request Ms. Shikha and Geetam Tiwari both to address this. And his question is, in terms of planning an efficient transport network, is BMRCL working with BMTC in terms of giving a total commuter experience? suppose I'm a commuter, I should not worry about BMRCL being a separate corporation as opposed to BMTC. What if we actually imagine the future when we have one smart card, which is what Jilani's idea is, or not just a smart card, but the possibility of imagining that when I step out of my door and I have to go somewhere, I have this capacity of transiting between different modes of public transport. And I would also include Tongas or cycle rickshaws, NMT, non-motorized transport. Why are transport corporations, be they bus or metro, not looking beyond their own balance sheets? Why is there no imagination of making mobility central? So that the bus lane gets its priority, the pedestrian gets its priority, is our priority. A person who cannot see or who's out of hearing gets to navigate. Why are we being so insensitive? I mean, is this the nature of the Indian, to be insensitive? So I would request both Geetam Tiwari and Shikha to respond to that.
Okay, may I come in?
Yes, please.
So yes, ideally, as you're mentioning, it has to be an integrated system, and that's what I discussed earlier also. In city, people are walking and bicycling, and we want, a lot of people are already using bus systems, and now we have constructed metro, so people are using that. So the question is that, we have BMTC, which is only worried about bus routes and bus lanes. They are still not worried about how people are coming to bus stops. And then we have metro, which is only worried about running metro trains and not really worried about how people are coming to metro stops. And if you get down, can you connect to another bus? What our understanding is that, metro in any city of India, including Delhi, where the metro has been considered a very successful system, DMRC and bus systems do not talk to each other at all. Routes, DTC routes are planned separately and metro is completely separate. Metro can demand change of land use, DTC does not have that power. Why this happens? Ideally, yes, we should have a public transport authority where the two systems, or in fact even bicycle systems, are integrated. We do not have this kind of integrated public transport authority in any of our cities. Very loosely, some master plans have chapters on transport, but those are kind of, vision chapters, and mostly talking about road infrastructure, not really talking about mobility systems. At one point, if you recall, there was a lot of debate on introducing comprehensive mobility plan. But then we have done away with that requirement now. And we have gone back to the system that bus systems keep thinking of making their systems more efficient in all ways: operations, finances, whatever infrastructure is required. And metro has always been treated as a separate system. So the need really is to have an integrated authority. And my understanding is that Center last year or year before last year came up with metro policy, which has made metro systems more attractive for more cities now. And they're able to buy, they're actually able to borrow money from all kinds of international financial institutions. So why cannot we have a public transport act? Why Metro Act? Today, Center is not worried about bus systems at all. And that's why, and states do not have that revenue. All, as it was mentioned earlier, that in all cities, state transport undertakings and bus systems are running under financial loss. First of all, we should not be concerned about, as far as bus systems are concerned, financial loss, because it's a public service. But if you have to run the system, cities do not have that revenue stream. They just don't have that money. And that is true with states also. So, and Center, unlike Metro, is not able to provide, even for CapEx, they are not able to provide money. If you recall, in 2008, to bail out the vehicle manufacturing industry, some grants were offered for buying new buses. but just buying new buses is not running a bus system. So that gap still remains. So I think we have to do really hard work in closing all these different gaps. So this is my answer. We have always treated the two systems separately, and unfortunately not as a complementary system, but as competing systems. So that's the unfortunate part.
Thank you. Shikha, would you like to add? How do you talk with Mr. Ajay Seth, for instance? And how do we bring Ajay Seth and you together, along with the BBMP Commissioner, now Mr. Manjunath Prasad, and make sure that you think about it from the commuter's experience and not from your own. We'll back the corporations. We'll make sure that the buses run well. We'll get bus lanes as much as there are metro lanes anyway, hardwired, hard engineered. But then you will also want to make sure that we have walking lanes and cycling lanes and also street vending zones so that we actually make our city safe and lively. How do you make that happen?
Completely agree with you here that it's not about the individuals who head these organizations, it's about the system which one has to develop. And as you know, in Bangalore, our comprehensive mobility plan is already, the draft publication has been done and it is on the process of getting finalized. It talks about comprehensive mobility in Bangalore city and takes into consideration all kinds of public transport systems, including private mode of transport also. And coming to integration, so the integration between different modes is on 3 levels. Most important is information integration, that people should know that what are the timing of various modes, like what time will the metro arrive and what would be, then when he steps down, what will be the arrival time of the next bus, and then when he or she steps down after the bus, what would be the next best last mile connectivity solution, whether it's a auto or whether it's a cycle. So this is in the information integration. In that level, we have made some progress. In all the metro stops, we have been able to display our this ETA, that is estimated time of arrival of buses, so that every metro traveler has that information of bus arrival. And at the same time, we have also adopted an open data policy so that bus information is also shared with other modes. Like we are in process of sharing it with some of the cycle, the shared bike or the hired bike system. We are doing that. If you have seen today's Times of India, we have also installed cycle racks in our buses, so that people who are traveling by cycle can just put their cycles on our buses and then move along. So that would be second level of integration, that is physical integration. That is, the passenger has to be taken to the step of next mode of transportation if it is required. So that would be kind of physical integration. And third would be financial integration, in that in the sense that some people are asking here about common mobility card, same card being used for both metro, BMTC, and then maybe whatever is the last mile connectivity solution. So all these 3 points completely agree, and we have also made substantial progress in this regard. Thankfully, metro are our tenants. They are also in the same building where we are sitting, and there has been a lot of constructive
do you meet for coffee? Do you meet Ajay Seth for coffee and chit chat about these things?
We do, and thankfully he was my former boss also, so we get quite a quick access whenever we approach him, and we discuss all these points, especially on financial integration point. We have made a lot of progress. We have also developed the RFP and a tender to be floated shortly for NCMC, that is the smart card solution for a single card for all types of journey. And the common mobility plan also speaks at length about all kinds of integration which Bangalore city is planning.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's excellent. I mean, the last 1.5 hours, if we just start off by, looking at how we started off by looking at the complexity of it and seeing the impossibility of the situation. Now we actually are seeing solutions much more clearly. And it's really about talking to each other and making sure that we understand each other. And my way is not the only way, and it's the highway sort of thing. So what I feel we have taken away from this conversation is the capability of understanding how central mobility is, in which the bus plays a major part. Without mobility, cities collapse. Without mobility, and we have suffered this very long lockdown, the most miserable life to have is to be stuck in one place, especially if you're in an apartment and a small one at that. You know how difficult it is. It's not like you can just run into a backyard which is open and full of fields and greenery and so on. So cities are not great places, especially the kind of cities we have built. And in that, if we make our public transport systems even terrible, it makes life extremely difficult. So I think in the overall sense of things, we have identified the fact that to try and four-stage the bus lane, and to be possible to bus from anywhere to anywhere else is not just about convenience, it's also a fundamental right that we have to the city. It's a fundamental right to walk and walk safely, a fundamental right to cycle, and do all of this, that is take a bus, ride the metro, cycle a bit, and also walk. All of this in one day's effort. And that's perhaps how we remain healthy. And so I think that's the kind of imagination with which I think I will extend thanks to Professor Geetam Tiwari, Ms. Shika, Usha, and Shaheen for making time and making it possible for us to imagine. And let's take these conversations forward. And I invite you again next Friday to the third part of this campaign, Better Bus Bengaluru, which is an effort along with Bengaluru Moving. Thank you all very much, and thank you for making time, especially to the speakers, for preparing, and coming for this. And look forward to having you next Friday.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next Friday, same time, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Leo.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks, Usha. Thanks, Shaheen.